ground, so really do a posterior tilt. And then, I'm sorry, not hands on your side. Put your hands behind your head, and just to support the weight of your head. What you don't want someone to do when they put their hands behind their head, because some people say, oh, well, you shouldn't do that because you yank on your neck. I don't want her elbows to come up. If her elbows come up, then she's going to be yanking on her neck. I also don't want her chin to collapse that imaginary space or that imaginary apple that I'm going to tell her to hold between her chin and her chest. So tell her to envision holding an apple right here. She doesn't want to crush it. She doesn't want to let it go. She wants to hold it right here the whole time. And as long as her chin, that space is facilitated, and as long as her elbows are out to the side, she's not going to be yanking on her neck at all. So go ahead and come up off the ground with your posterior tilt towards the ceiling. Good. And then back down. You can come up probably a little bit higher. Go ahead and push into the ground, come a little bit higher. Good. And that's how you do abdominal curl. For a beginner, believe it or not, that would be very difficult. So for some beginners, they wouldn't even be able to keep their back flat on the ground throughout that. How can I make this a little more challenging?
Legs in the air.
Remember, I can make the resistance arm longer. The reason I'm going faster is because you guys already saw these abdominal exercises. I think that's what you did, right?
I did those.
Or how you did this, right? So could you put your hands behind your head, back flat still, good. And go ahead and come up towards the ceiling. I could use my hands to target. So you did shoulder flexion there. I want your elbows, your humerus to stay up by your ears the whole time. Your arms should be by your ears. There you go, perfect. So come up towards my hand, back down. Make it even a little bit more challenging. Add resistance, hold the ball, and bridge up towards my hand. Now we're getting to more intermediate from novice. Good. We can add a little bit of obliques where she'll target and come up, and trunk rotation will be added to it a little bit. Excellent. Okay. Breathe out on the way up. Okay. Now we get very good. Now we can get a little more challenging by using the lower abdominals. Now you do only have the rectus abdominis is what flexes the trunk. But since she's engaging that posterior tilt, she's also using her transverse abdominis and a little bit of her internal obliques there. But of the rectus abdominis, you really only have one muscle. So it is true, we don't have lower abs and upper abs, we have one muscle. But you do change the pull on that muscle so you emphasize certain fibers over others. So when she flexes her trunk from the lower body, she's going to be using more of her lower abdominals. So that part is true. And the lower abdominals are important they should be strong, but it's really important that they're long too, because if they're short, it really causes that trunk flexion and that forward chest position that can create neck problems and stuff. So what I want her to do is keep her hands flat on the ground, and her back has to be flat against the ground. That's really important so we don't use the hip flexors. And take your knee up to your chest, 90-degree bend here, 90-degree bend, perfect. And as long as your back doesn't come off the floor, you're doing this with your abs. So you can go lower your heels to the ground with your knees bent. There we go. So you're just going to keep your knees in a fixed position like this. You're going to come up and back down, just like that. As long as her back stays flat on the ground, she's using her abs. And I can even add a little bit of resistance, so like manual resistance. Or if she's really strong, which she seems to be because her back isn't budging off the ground, she can do this with her legs straight. This is where some companies will tell you it's contraindicated. Some will tell you that it's good. And it really comes down to whether or not she's strong enough to do it. Now, if she was weak, what would happen as her legs came down to the ground?
Yeah,
Well, her back would come off the floor, and she'd start using her hip flexors. What I want her to do is keep her back flat on the floor. You come down low, and right about there, your back's starting to come up, so then come back up again. So just come down to where your back starts to come off. Ready? Right there, that's it. And back up. Perfect. So she's using abdominals to this, and you can tell how strong she is by the movement. It's all coming from the hips because her hip flexors are out of the equation and she's using her abs. That's really good. Now the next one that's even more advanced is using the upper body and lower body together. Does anyone know what we call that? A V-up. Can you do V-ups? Perfect. So again, back has to be flat on the floor. It's arched right now. Good. And go ahead and show me what a V-up would look like. Okay, up, together. And now her back's not on the floor, but what we see is that her spine is not arching. If she was using her hip flexors, her spine would arch. So she's keeping a nice, perfect V shape. That's really advanced. I mean, for someone even who's in good shape, to do 5 or 6 of those, it's really going to be fatiguing. And we haven't used any weights at this point. But we could do weights because what we could have her